But let's get to the biggest talking point of this race then, and really the point of the whole episode. That's the Schumacher versus Hill battle with the Benetton on slicks and Hill on wets. Hill came out of the pits right behind Schumacher and went straight on the attack, but Schumacher was robust in his defence, using all of the road and often running Hill out of road as he tried to keep him behind, despite the Williams being on wets on a wet track. There's so much to talk about here that we'll have to break it down into chunks. So let's start with what Schumacher said about it. Post-race, he said he was trying to keep Hill behind because he knew it was going to dry out and he wanted to halt Hill's momentum while Damon was on the right tyres. Michael also raised some eyebrows, not least from Hill, when he said, "It got very tight, but I think we did it in situations where it was quite easy. We didn't do it in high-speed corners, and in slow-speed corners, nothing can really happen if you drive that close, and I just took that risk. We are professional drivers, and we know how to stay on the track." Hill responded to that while sat next to Michael in the press conference, saying, "If he is honestly suggesting it's okay because it's a slow corner, then we know where he stands." Ben, we're going to save our scrutiny of what Schumacher did for now, so keep your furious powder dry on that. What do you think of this idea, though, that you can take a few more liberties in slower corners because the risks are lower?
Well, Damon's obviously going to say what he said because he's still triggered by, as all Damon Hill fans are too, by Adelaide, which is a slow corner. But like objectively, it is the case that it's much lower risk at low speed, and especially in this era of Formula One, before the safety drivers really kicked into, top gear, there is much more danger of having a really, potentially life-ending shunt if you come together in, say Maggots Beckett's rather than at the source. So what Schumacher says is strictly true, but I think he's also, as he was, slightly over the line in suggesting, well, I can deliberately take more liberties with other drivers in those corners. I don't think that's something that occurred to other people on the grid, certainly Damon.
Yeah, it's I guess you could admire the honesty. When I read this quote in full, and when I saw it, I think there may even be part of it on the season review. I'm not sure. I was kind of stunned that Michael, he's just that up front. He's telling the world, "Oh yeah, slower corners. Throw my car around a bit more." Hill was absolutely raging about this battle afterwards. I'll give you a smattering of lines. He did so many interviews post-race. He told the BBC, "Today we had a great, exciting race, but there have to be rules about to what extent you can drive like that. There is a line which I believe you shouldn't go over, and I felt at some points it went over that line a little bit." In the press conference, he said, "I must say I'm not satisfied with being driven into. I didn't think that was acceptable. But other than that, we had a great race. I don't mind racing against someone, and they are entitled to make it difficult to overtake, but my understanding is that physical contact is to be avoided. It's not my way of doing things, but if that's what you've got to do, and it's permissible, then I'll do it too." He also said, "These are Formula One cars, they're not go-karts," which prompted an amused Schumacher, still sat next to him, to join in by saying, "You must try go-karts, they're good." And you could tell Damon didn't like that, didn't know what to do with that comment either. Another thing he said about the contact, which I think must be when Schumacher ran him out of road at Les Combes, is really, there's no suggestion anywhere else of them coming close to colliding. Damon said, "That's all well and good if it's accidental, but if it's meant on purpose, then I'd be pretty upset." Matt, if there was any contact in this battle, would you class it as accidental on Schumacher's part?
What's a word for shruggy? Like, nah, whatever. Just like I don't think Schumacher tries to hit Hill at any point. I also don't think Schumacher is that bothered if Hill goes onto the grass, avoiding him, and clatters into the barrier and is out of the race, and he would not take any responsibility for that. And neither should he, really. We will argue about this properly in a moment, I'm sure. But I don't think Schumacher is trying to take Hill out at any point here or trying to crash into him. I think he's just trying to make sure he stays ahead in a reasonably responsible way. But if Hill was to wander into the barriers in the process, I also don't think Schumacher would care in the slightest.
No, it sounds about right. Let's add some balance for Damon here by looking at what he said about it in the 2020 watch-along, when he obviously had cooled down a bit by this point. as he's watching the battle back with Sky's David Croft, Martin Brundle and Johnny Herbert, Hill said, "Nowadays you look at that and it looks very tame. He was changing lines and stuff, but there aren't any straight lines in Spa really, so he just went to the apex every time. He closes the door, goes around the outside where sometimes it can be grippier, and then he's nerfed me and generally just made it clear that he would push me off the track rather than let me pass. It's amazing how time changes your perspective on things. You can see what he's doing. He's very cleverly positioning his car, and I think a lot of people thought he was weaving, but he's not actually technically doing anything wrong, I don't think." Amusingly, Damon then goes on to say, "There must be more to it than we're seeing on the footage they're watching back, as he seemed to be expecting it to be more egregious based on having read his own quotes from the time. But as far as I can tell, although for this one, the Sky Watch Along was the extended highlights, not the live race, as far as I can tell from everything I've watched back, they do show the whole battle." Brundle offered his view too on the watch along, saying, "If I was commentating on that, I'd have said that was fair racing. Michael wanders into your path, but I don't think there's anything wrong with this." Ben, as a fully signed up member of Team Hill, how did you feel about this at the time, and what do you think of it now? Like looking through a today lens, as kind of Damon and Brundle had to do there.
Well, at the time, obviously, I'd have been absolutely furious, and that Schumacher should have been thrown out the race, and it should be another 10-point swing to Damon. But I just started to get into racing myself at this point, and fast forward all these years, and obviously watching Formula One from a modern perspective, there's absolutely nothing in it at all. It's just basically Damon faffing around on the better tyres. It's not dried out at this point. Schumacher's on the slicks trying to just brave and gain a free pit stop. Hill should just go past him, but how does he not outbrake him into the on the wets? It makes no sense.
Yeah,
you've got more grip. Use it.
Exactly. So he just gives, and you haven't got Johnny Herbert's ankles. So come on, just get the brake pressure on and do it. But he faffs around, allows Schumacher to bully him, and then just sort of loses his head for a few laps, by which point it's kind of done. And, going back to the kind of racecraft element, there's definitely like a generational difference, I think, in Schumacher and Hill, in that Hill comes from a family that raced during the most dangerous period of F1 and lives were lost. He came from motorcycle racing himself, where obviously contact is, complete no-no, because you could just kill each other at any speed, whereas Schumacher's coming from, go-karting, you should try it background, and not having this kind of same sense of history. So I think their whole approach to racing was diametrically opposed in this period. I think probably we all looked at it at the time as it being a bit over the line, just because Schumacher was pushing those boundaries and others just didn't even conceive that you could bully people on the track like that. It was still a bit more kind of, well, if you're quicker, you just go past and you give each other space. I mean, even Schumacher's at that point being quite tame. There are lines he takes which leave a gap for Hill that nowadays that would be just chopped, and then you'd weave back across and block the other side as well, and you'd definitely put Damon on the grass. You wouldn't allow him to just kind of wander to the outside of the track by himself. So yeah, I think Damon's probably just remembered at the time feeling really frustrated in himself that he couldn't get the move done on Schumacher when he had a massive advantage. And it's just then extrapolated over the years. So yeah, he nerfed me and he touched me, but I couldn't see any contact or really Schumacher doing anything wrong, to be honest. Sorry, Damon.